Hi, this is Alan, and I'm going to go ahead and just do a quick rundown on the O2 hazards. I know I have some other clips on YouTube right now, but I just want to give you a rundown. Now, this is not a complete, detailed definition, but we need to start somewhere. What I'm going to do is first start with absorption atelectasis. Absorption atelectasis, let's think of the words. Absorption. Absorption. What's being absorbed? The nitrogen. Where is the nitrogen? The nitrogen can be found throughout the whole body, in the alveoli, in the blood, and in the body cavities. When we give high levels of oxygen, greater than 50%, very quickly to a patient, what will happen is these nitrogen levels are going to be washed out. They're going to get into the venous system, and they're going to be removed. That means the body cavity, the alveoli, no longer has this nitrogen level available to help keep the alveoli open. So now, without that pressure keeping the alveoli open, the alveoli will shrink. Now, the only thing that's left in the alveoli is the oxygen. When the oxygen crosses the AC membrane, it goes into the blood. There's nothing left to keep the alveoli open, and it collapses. When I have a bunch of collapsed alveoli, that is known as atelectasis. So I have the absorption of nitrogen due to the high administration of oxygen greater than 50%, which leads to the atelectasis, which is the collapse of alveoli. Who does this and where does this occur frequently? This occurs when we have patients who are breathing small tidal volumes. This can be due to post-operative pain or maybe even sedation. But the key here is breathing small tidal volumes. It doesn't normally happen in patients who can breathe normal tidal volumes and occasionally take a side breath. This has been absorption atelectasis. The next one is O2 toxicity. O2 toxicity is oxygen that becomes toxic. You have to remember that oxygen is a drug. Too much of a drug can be a bad thing. When you deliver oxygen to a patient, I want you to think of a couple of things. First thing, the PO2. How much oxygen you're going to expose the lung to. And that PO2, okay, the amount of PO2 that we expose the lung to over a period of time. As we increase this time, what we end up doing is that we put the lung in harm's way. Why? The O2 releases free radicals. And in my book, being radical is probably not a good thing. And these free radicals being released in the lungs are going to destroy type 1 alveolar cells and proliferate or multiply type 2. These multiplication of type 2 alveolar cells forces the lungs to go into an exudative stage or a fluid buildup. When this fluid builds up in the lungs, it makes it more difficult for oxygen to be able to go from in the lung and across the AC membrane, decreasing the ventilation portion, even though I have plenty of perfusion going to the lungs. So in essence, I have an increase in my VQ mismatch. This increased VQ mismatch and exposure level of oxygen in the lung, if that goes unchecked for a longer period of time, what will end up happening is we will end up having a thickening of the AC membrane. This thickening of the AC membrane will and can lead to something called ARDS, Adult Respiratory Distress Syndrome. Another thing I would hope that you would remember, besides this PO2 times time, is this circle. And this circle is the vicious cycle. Why do we give a patient oxygen? Because they have a low partial pressure of oxygen in the arterial blood. What do we do? What's wrong? Decrease PaO2. What do we do? Increase the FiO2. When should we stop? When the underlying condition that made us put the patient on oxygen has been resolved. But remember, oxygen releases free radicals, and it can destroy lung tissue. We've already been through the definition of what it does: destroying type 1, proliferating type 2, increasing fluid levels in the lungs, causing non-cardiogenic pulmonary edema. What do we need to do now is stop exposing the lung to so much oxygen. But if we, the respiratory therapists, don't do this and don't keep a close watch on the patient, what will end up happening is, well, initially I had a low PaO2, I increased the FiO2, and guess what? My saturation in PaO2 improved, but my exposure to the O2 still continued on at a longer, increased time of exposure to oxygen in the lung. So what ends up happening? I end up increasing the FiO2 even more, destroying more parts of the lung, furthering my VQ mismatch. So I'm going to have more of a problem with ventilation to perfusion. Perfusion's fine, but ventilation is having a problem because of this fluid buildup. Well, if this goes unchecked, PaO2 will further go down, knee-jerk reaction, increase the FiO2. Oh, that sounds real smart. Let's expose the lung to even more free radicals. All of a sudden, you're destroying lung segment after lung segment that it gets to a point where there is almost no ventilation whatsoever, just some perfusion going on, and that is called shunting. The blood is just getting to the lung and shunting right by with no gas exchange occurring. Okay? VQ mismatch, ventilation to perfusion, not having enough ventilation, plenty of perfusion. What is shunting? It is the same thing as a VQ mismatch, but shunting is a VQ mismatch on steroids. Okay, that's an analogy. It is a terrible case. It's a very severe case of a VQ mismatch. Now that was O2 toxicity.
Oh, and one other thing.
The Earth isn't round, it's flat.
How do you know?
I've observed it in all my travels over Europe. It's flat. Everywhere it's flat.